Can't believe that it's actually outperforming my 12-core Mac Pro. We finally got our new 10-core iMac in with the high-end 5700X graphics. Seems like it's been forever of a wait, and today we're gonna see how this thing performs. Now, let me be honest, I know this thing is gonna be super powerful. Looking at the 8-core, that thing is already excellent, but what I'm curious about is how loud will this thing be and how hot will it run with 10 cores inside this machine. So we're gonna figure out all of that. We're gonna figure out how much wattage it pulls. We're gonna see how it performs, and I'm even gonna compare it to my Mac Pro. Before we jump in, I have to mention two things. First off, this modern Apple product shirt from Max Tech, super comfortable. Make sure you go pick one up in the merch shelf or grab one of those masks that are really popular right now. And number two, we saved a ton of money installing RAM ourselves. It took less than a minute. We have 64 gigabytes here. It's working perfectly. Vadim, how much does Apple charge?
$1,000.
$1,000 Apple charges for 64 gigs, and we paid $250. So we saved $750 in a matter of less than a minute, really. Make sure you follow our RAM install guide. We'll have a link down below and save yourself a bunch of money. Let's jump right into Geekbench 5. And one interesting thing that I noticed is this is labeled an i9 10910 CPU. I was expecting the 10900K, but it looks like it's a modified version. We'll see how it performs. Let's hit run CPU benchmark, and I have Intel Power Gadget open. I wanna see the frequencies we hit and how much wattage Apple is allowing the iMac to run at. So it looks like the 10 core, the max it will hit is 5.0, just as advertised, but it's good to see that we're actually hitting that, where a lot of times on the MacBook Pros, they get close, but they don't. And now we have 156, 157 watts here, 159, once we got some of the tougher tests. That is really high. The previous i9 from last year, the highest it hit is 115 in Geekbench 5. So Apple is allowing this CPU to get as much power as it needs to have great performance. Now for reference, the 8-core, the base one that comes this year, that hit 129 this year and actually went up to 5.1 gigahertz for some reason, slightly higher than it's actually rated. All right, we have our score, and I have to say, this is interesting. Our multi-core score is 9737, which is higher than even the 10-core iMac Pro. But if we do the math, that is just about 10% more performance than the 8-core that comes included without having to do this upgrade that costs $400 more. And 10 cores, it's about 25% more cores, so we're not getting, a linear amount of performance. And then compared to last year's i9, it's about 17% more powerful, this i9, compared to 2019. And now let's talk about the single core, 1271. That's the highest single core score out of any Mac. And what's interesting is not only does it beat out the 10-core iMac Pro, which I expected, but last year's i9, that was actually the fastest. This year's i7 beat it, and then this i9 beats it once again. So not only do we have 10 cores now in the system, but it doesn't give up any single core performance to the lower core models. And now let's touch on the graphics. I'm gonna go ahead and run the metal test. And what really excites me about this new iMac is Apple put in the 5700 XT graphics card inside of here. That's the graphics card that I recommend most people get if they do video editing on the Mac Pro. It's the graphics card we recommend for eGPU setups. And not only do they pop the desktop class card in here, but they also double the video memory. So if you just buy that graphics card for your PC or your eGPU, it has 8 gigs of memory. This one has 16, just like the one that you can get on the Mac Pro, but it costs less money to upgrade to. And we have our score, and wow, that is disappointing. 57,898. We were expecting about 75,000. That's roughly what they get in a Mac Pro. With the eGPU, you're looking more at about this performance. I wanna go ahead and run that again, because it seems like it should be doing better than that. I don't know if Apple maybe downclocked the ones in this iMac just so that it doesn't put out as much heat or something like that. And with our second run, we got 59,417, almost 60,000. Now with that said, with the 5500 XT that we have in our 8-core model, it scored fairly low in metal, but in the real world video editing and other tests that we ran, it actually performed really, really well. So we'll have to do some more testing. Now let's go ahead and open up Unigine Heaven, which is a gaming benchmark, and we'll see if we notice a bigger difference here. Now, as this is running, I wanna point something out that just popped into my mind. So far, things are kind of opposite from what I expected. I expected the performance scores to be higher, but I also expected the fan noise to be much louder, and so far it's been completely silent. We'll see what we get towards the end of this run, but right now the graphics is running at just 75 degrees Celsius. The test is done, and wow! We have 96.2 frames per second, which is 50% faster than the 5500 XT that we have in our 8-core model, and about 45% faster than the best graphics card that you could get last year, which was the Vega 48. Not only that, it also beats out the Vega 56 and the Vega 64 in the iMac Pro, and looking at this score, it's better than I expected, whereas the metal test in Geekbench 5 was lower than I expected, so there might be something with drivers or the testing that's going on, because the real world tests that we're seeing with these new graphics cards in 2020s are really good. And with that, I want to talk about thermals. Right now we're running at about 87 degrees Celsius, and the fans did spin up just a little bit above idle. So if you are quiet, you can slightly hear it, almost like a whisper, but it is still running quiet even after, I think it's been more than 2 runs that keeps cycling here in the background. So that is a great thing. And now for the ultimate test, we have Cinebench R20 here. We're gonna max out all 10 of these cores while keeping an eye on our temperatures, our noise, the wattage. Let's go ahead and get started here. Right away, our wattage is going up here, 80 watts, 142, 146, 148. It's leveling off, which is interesting, 150. Last year's i9 only hit 120, but interestingly, the 2028 core actually hit 161 in this test. Now we're getting these little wattage spikes and these little temperature spikes, which is showing me that it's actually throttling down the wattage in order to keep it from getting too hot. And the fans only now are starting to spin up. Before it was silent, so only towards the end of the test. And we have a score of 5,398, basically 5,400 for our first run. I'm gonna run that again. We're gonna see what our actual temperature is stabilized at and the clock speed stabilized at. But 5,400 is right around where my 12-core Mac Pro actually gets in Cinebench R20, even though we have 2 less cores. We're finishing up with our 3rd consecutive run right now. The fans are at full blast, 2,700 RPMs, and it looks like the stabilized clock speed is right at 4 to 4.03, 4.06. Last year's i9 actually did 3.75 gigahertz was what it stabilized at. So this year, even with more cores, the same cooling, it's actually running better, but it's not running at that 4.4 gigahertz that the 8-core runs at. I just let it cool down for a little bit and I ran it one more time. We got a score of 5535, which is higher than my Mac Pro. And I wanted to see this time just that curve of how long it takes for it to heat up, because it does run hot. And it is a much smoother curve. It only heats up towards the end of the test compared to some of the other Macs, which they heat up instantly. Part of that is because Apple's limiting this at 150 watts, where the 8-core, it actually can go higher than this 10-core. So they're trying to keep this thing cool. But in general, you can expect 5,400 to 5,535 as far as performance. Now this score is 38% higher and faster than the previous last year's i9. But with that said, it's about 14% faster than this year's 8-core, which you do have to spend another $400 to get that extra 14% of performance. Now in Geekbench 5, we saw that it was more like a 10% of performance, and that's with about 25% more cores, just because that can run at a higher wattage and higher clock speeds. But that doesn't tell the whole story. We also have a bunch of other videos planned. We're gonna do a boot camp gaming video. I'm gonna compare how this does to my $15,000 Mac Pro and a lot more. So make sure you guys are subscribed. You guys have those notifications enabled so you don't miss that. So overall, what did we learn? Well, first off, the graphics card that is in here is super fast, at least in the one real world test that we did. It by far outperforms having an eGPU with the same graphics chip. We also learned that the 10 core isn't that much faster than the 8 core that you can get while saving a lot of money, and based on our real world tests, you might want to just skip that option. I also learned that it's not as loud as I expected. Apple's doing a good job managing the thermals, so it doesn't heat up that fast, the fans don't ramp up super fast, and for the gaming test, it actually stayed surprisingly quiet. So there we have it, guys. Let us know any questions that you have down in the comment section below. If you're interested or if you have a video idea, let us know. Make sure to check out our merch. This shirt is super comfortable. Make sure you get the premium one like I have here. This has been Max, and we'll see you in the next video.